Well, thank you very much. It was a really last-minute planning because I'm here and I missed yesterday plane. I missed it today. Well, I didn't miss it, but it was cancelled. And I think I just arrived 20 minutes ago, so I think this shows how effective trade unions can be. I think I'm really proud of myself. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the Secretary General of CESI, the European Confederation of Independent Trade Unions. We represent 38 member organizations to Europe, mainly public sector employees. I'm not an expert on management tools and efficiency in public sector. So I want you to be aware of that. I want to raise your interest and maybe I even get you on my side when it comes to involving the workers of the public sector, right? So the question, the topic of my presentation is why do we need an effective public sector and how workers help in building it. Ladies and gentlemen, you all know this gentleman. He is president of the European Commission, and he recently, it was Bureau of the European Policy Advisors, they organized a conference on the effectiveness, as far as I know, of the public sector in Europe. And he said the following, he said, the public sector has to be a partner for change, in public sector innovation a driver, which is total nonsense, as you know. He said the public sector has to be a partner for change in public sector innovation, comma, the driver. Now this is great for me as a Secretary General of the European Confederation of Independent Trade Unions because I see, wow, public sector is back on track. Public sector is getting back in the minds of the people. Public sector, people start to realize more and more how important public sector is. Not that they haven't realized in the past, but I will come to this later. We all know that public sector in the past has suffered. So when Barroso says a driver, then of course I'm listening very, very carefully, and as such I am happy. Now second part of the sentence which intrigued me a little bit, or one word in the sentence, is he speaks of partnership. Now we as trade unions, we of course always have the feeling partnership is something when you sit together around the table, you discuss issues and you agree maybe after a certain consultation, information consultation about a certain result. Now this is for us partnership. But we have the feeling, and maybe so do you, that in the past this hasn't really happened, right? That it was more about decisions being taken by governments, or maybe also certain times by the Troika, by decisions of the Council, then certain initiatives, certain measures were taken without consulting the public sector, and of course from our point of view, which is very important, without consulting the trade unions. Now we believe that when changes are due, when you want to innovate public sector, when you want to make it more efficient, more effective, you need to discuss it, of course, with partners beforehand. This is where we have a very strong position on. And we have the feeling that the reforms which have been undertaken, I will come back to it in the future and in a couple of minutes, are of course only cost-driven, right? I mean, government have to spare money, so the first thing they do is to cut in their own public sector. So we believe that public sector and public sector workers are both, or should be, the partners and the drivers for change and innovation. If we forget this, then, this is my personal opinion, and I think we will not have room for discussions afterwards, which I think I regret a little bit, but I think I have to speak now. 49 minutes, is that right? Or 49 and a half, so you have 20 seconds time for a question. But I would like to discuss that, of course, with you, because we believe that public sector for reforms need to involve those partners concerned. I will, in my presentation, it's like flying through space here, you know, how with new technologies. It's fantastic. Well, I have to admit, it was my colleague who made it. But I think this is also management wisdom, that you say you can be the biggest imbecile. You still have to be so smart to employ people who are smarter than you. And that's what I did, and that's what my colleague made this nice presentation for me. So I would like to briefly speak with you about, I mean, you're the expert, but how I see it as a Secretary General of the European Confederation of Independent Trade Unions. Why do we need a strong, effective and performing public sector in Europe? The problems we are facing in the public sector and the challenges faced by public sector workers, and of course to see in how far social dialogue or the unions, information consultation provide answers. Right. We know that trade unions don't have the best reputation nowadays. I'm very, very honest with you. Very often the reputation is a little bit, how could I say, old-fashioned against changes, and I want to discuss with you a little bit today, and I hope to be able to show you in how far this is, trade unions are also open to reforms, but that of course they cannot betray the interests of their own members. At the same time, we have to increase our membership, and that is why, and we have to play our role in society, and that is why I believe that we have a very important role to play in the future. So let's fly back, and let's go into the first part. All right, we all know the public sector is a major player, economic player. It's a major employer. If my figures are correct, we have about 64 million employees in the public sector. We have, I think, depending on the different member states, about 40% of expenses of GDP or 50% of expenses of GDP for the public sector. And we have, I think, altogether, I was saying it's 64 million individual employees working for the public sector. So the public sector has definitely, of course, a very important economic role to play and financial role to play. And I believe also that the crisis has particularly shown how important public sector is. I know that's a little bit simplistic to say that the public sector or public finance have saved the banks, but I think also it came back into the public view, in the public mind, how important actually the general interest or the common good can be as compared to the private sector. I think in 2008 people were saying, well, that's how it goes, and that was the moment when public finances intervened, and I believe that this in a way brought back the consciousness of people about the importance of the public sector in general. I believe that is why we also have to continue in our argumentation, and I turn to everybody in this context really that is the feeling we have, that public sector is being bashed. Yeah. Public sector is a cost factor. Public sector is something, how somebody said, it's a stone in the shoe of the single market when you see it from the EU level. And public sector is being seen very often as hindering the, let's say, the free movement of workers or of services especially. So that is why we want to highlight again that, as I said earlier, the public sector is supporting the economy. The public sector has saved the economy, and the public sector is supporting the society. That is what we strongly believe, and I think you're the first also to share these views. So why is it that governments on the public debate, we only see the public sector as cost? Why is it not the case that we see it whenever we speak of social services, we speak of health, we speak of education, that we don't see it as a very strong investment. Now we say healthcare. Yeah, I remember recently the Commission President Barroso, I think it was in July this year, explicitly recognizing the merits of a healthy society, and I quote him, he said, "Good health, of course, is first of all good for people. Good health can also be very good for business, whereas poor health is notably bad for business." Today, absenteeism represents 3 to 6% of working time lost, leading to a yearly cost of about 2.5% of GDP in Europe. So investing in health, of course, once again, nothing new to you, is an investment for which we can expect a concrete return. We should consider taxation. Taxation is right at the top of the agenda of the political class at the moment, and it is of course not a question of revenue only, but it is also a question of tax justice. I mean, when we always raising taxes as a first reaction to the crisis, a first reaction to unbalanced budgets, or we create new form of taxations, this is where we say as trade unions, this should not be the correct approach, because we feel that for reasons of tax justice, everybody should pay, of course, the taxes due. And when we look at the estimations, how much public money is being lost or wasted, I think there were recent estimations concerning tax fraud and tax evasion, which went up to 1,000 billion of euros in the EU lost every year because of taxes actually due, which have not been collected. I mean, the investment for education is so self-evident, the investment factor, that I don't want to even go into that, but this is of course another strong issue which we would like to highlight, that investing in education is investing, of course, in the future. We all know, and this is of course the main topic of today's conference, that the public sector also must adapt to the times. Public sector innovation is an important step in this process, and in recent years administrations have already made large efforts in modernizing their processes and in strengthening transparency and access to information. However, of course, we believe more can be done, and we believe that this requires investment. That's as simple as that. According to both the OECD and the European Commission, Europe is not investing enough in the public sector. It might seem a little bit funny when we look at the current policies of reduction of staff. We'll come to that later also, that actually really the OECD and the European Commission stating Europe is not investing enough in the public sector. It therefore lags behind and is not adapting as fast as other sectors. This is not surprising given the current policies, as I said, which Europe is pursuing. And according to both the OECD and the ILO, large-scale downsizing, I'm quoting now, is the most problematic approach to workforce adjustment. Recruitment freezes are the most detrimental ones, and workforce implications of any reform need to be considered and planned from the outset. Of course, this is water on the mills of the trade unions, but this is why I'm mentioning it. So what is crucial is taking people along, bringing them on board with these new processes. And I believe that without support from employees and citizens, innovation will simply not work. People need people to understand how and why this is taking place. Now, when you look at the recently published European Public Sector Scoreboard, we can, I think, state the following first. Drivers of public sector innovation can be internal, not only through external pressure. Innovation is no longer a result of a mere top-down approach. And the most important for us, again, barriers to innovation are the lack of human or financial resources. Barriers to innovation are regulatory requirements. Barriers to innovation are lack of management support. And barriers to innovation are lack of incentives for staff. So I allow myself to remind you that I'm here to underline how crucial it is to include those who will implement public sector innovation in the processes. So the public sector can employ, public sector can stabilize the economy, public sector can ease the, it sounds a little bit tragic, but I wrote it this way, can ease the pains on society. The public sector can generate growth, and the public sector can innovate. The question is simply, do we have the right conditions set for the public sector doing all this? Are we sure that we can do more with less? Aren't we at least sometimes doing less with less, or even worse, maybe less with more? And I just wanted to have a quick look with you on the different measures taken in the different countries in terms of workforce reduction. And you can see, I mean, Austria replacing 50% of retiring staff. I mean, I have to admit, these are 2012 figures, right? So since 2012, a lot has happened, of course. But it gives an overall impression. We have the Czech Republic, 10% reduction in staff in 2010. We have, when you look at the Netherlands, which is particularly striking, a reduction of 120,000 to 150,000 jobs. And the UK, 490,000 hiring jobs and hiring freeze. And we can continue with Portugal, with Spain, with Italy, with Greece, with the UK, and with other countries. So I think this gives a good overall impression about the different measures taken. And for me, the simple questions is, and that's I'm really, it's a pity that we can actually not have an intense discussion on that, but are these the right discussion? Are they the right conditions? Yeah? Are we sure after all that has been said about the importance of public sector, and especially in times of crisis, that this is the right way? I'm not convinced. I know many governments in Europe are selling the short-term knee-jerk reactions as long-term solutions. But I believe that there may be unexpected long-term social and economic damage, which in the end costs more, which create a heavier financial burden on public services and, as mentioned before, heavier loads for the society in the long term. Yes, I'm also concerned that this path, and this is a very personal vision of you, will lead us more and more to the falling apart of a fundamental principle of our societies, which is solidarity and social cohesion. Now these, again, very dramatic words, I know, and don't think I'm an old communist. I lived myself in the Soviet Union in order to be quite reluctant when it comes to issues of collective happiness, but I still believe that we have to realize that our freedom is not least also based on security and safety, which in turn is based on equal opportunities and social stability. So before cutting, before downsizing, to my mind, to our mind, a more stringent evidence analysis should take place to prove the long-term merits and consequences of doing more with less. So let's fly through space again. We come to the second part. Impact on the crisis on working conditions in Europe. Here's a lot of studies, of course, and I don't want to bore you with details of studies. I just want to say that there have been changes. There is a greater insecurity. I'll show you some details later. We believe that there's a lower morale. There's an intensification of workload. There are increased stress levels. There are greater levels of tension in the workplace. And there are increased levels of violence and harassment. So the question for us, once again Australians, are, say, layoffs, less stuff, and at the same time less good working conditions. Does this have an impact on the quality of services delivered? For me, this is a fact, right? Once again, a little bit provokingly, I would say, will the underpaid teacher be able to offer the best in education that our children deserve? Will the overworked doctor or nurse be able to provide the high quality healthcare our citizens needs? Or will, and now it sounds really tragic, but it is the case, will the more beaten civil servant do its best to implement public policies aimed at the general interest and serving the common good? Well, I don't believe so. And I think this in times when the citizens rightfully demand more and more public service, I think we will sooner or later come to the conclusion that good working conditions, respect and recognitions of the workers are the backbone to high quality services, to those services actually needed. This is just a short overview about the changes in job security. This is from the Eurofound study published beginning of the year. Also, as you can see, there's a little bit of difference between those states which have a strong central administration and those who are more federally organized. But you see, of course, on the right-hand side in these blue columns that the amount of insecure jobs are more and more raising. This is a study, I forgot to mention that, concerning the central public administration. Another thing which is for us not unimportant is that as regards working standards, the public sector no longer leads the way, right? It no longer sets the standards. To quote here from the ILO report, I think it was called Public Sector Shock, published this year. Instead of pressing for reform of private sector conditions, policymakers are holding them up as a benchmark against which to judge conditions in the public sector. It could be criticized. I could be criticized for implying that public sector workers should enjoy better working conditions than those employed in the private sector. I'm not saying this, definitely not. But I just once again want to draw your attention to the special importance of the public sector. So for me, it is certain at the moment that the right conditions are not in place to get the most out of the public sector. For me, the right conditions are not in place to get the most out of the workers, to motivate the ones we have in the best possible form. For me, the right conditions are not in place to get the best workers. Which leads me to the third part, how to address the current challenges and how workers can help. I think, knowing that I'm dealing here with real experts in terms of new management tools or reforms in public sector, for me, in order to determine, or to, how could I say, to grasp this vicious circle in the most effective way, would to concentrate on three main issues, which is the role of the image in the public sector in the eyes of the employer, meaning the attractiveness of the public sector as an employer. The role, the image of the public sector in the eyes of the citizens, and of course using new technologies and processes. I would like to refer to a study which was made last year by a professor from Warsaw, and you may know that at the European level there's something called like the European Social Dialogue and the European Social Dialogue in Central Government Administration, and this committee asked for a study of a Professor Sobiek, and Professor Sobiek came to the general following conclusion in his study, that the low level of trust in central government administration constitutes an acute problem in most of the studied countries. 54% of respondents were of the view that majority of citizens in the country did not trust central government administration. So we have basically central government administrations which are working in the general interest, I repeat myself, in the common good, and 54% of the people don't trust them. Quite an interesting figure. Then bureaucracy, I'm sorry, I would have shown this to you on this, but somehow it got lost in the space of the internet when sending that from Brussels here. So I'm reading that to you. Bureaucracy stereotype, seeing central government administration as top-heavy, inefficient and wasteful, is a key determinant of public perception in most of the studied countries. That is the second state conclusion. The third conclusion, internal image is strongly affected by a feeling of unsatisfactory recognition from the performance and by dissatisfaction with existing relations between employees and employers. And for me, one of the main issues, which is extremely interesting, I find that this study also reveals that many elements of positive image of central government administrations were closely linked with a high level of employment, right, in general government. So it seemed that everyday experience of numerous public services and understanding of government administration role result in the public consent for significant presence of public sector in the labor market. But as mentioned before, the rhetoric of the times has somehow condemned the public sector. It is widely seen as a scapegoat. Once again, I want to, this is just a study, you know. I don't know which famous politician once said, don't trust any study which you haven't falsified yourself. Once again, this is the study which is made on behalf of the Social Dialogue Committee, Central Government Administration, and I think there's something which should basically appall all of us, that 43.5% of the citizens who were interviewed and who were in favor, who said there's certain reason of public support to support austerity measures, said because the public sector is a burden for society. Now, I think this is shocking. I find this very, very shocking, and I also feel like, I mean, we can reform as we want, we can adjust as much as we want. If we don't get this issue solved, the image of the public sector or the views of citizens and how they see the public sector, we can do whatever we want. We will not be successful. Second point, which is basically diametrically opposed to it, is that one of the key elements of job satisfaction is, of course, the importance of work. And I mean, if coming back to the previous slide, if 43.5 of the respondents say that the public sector is a burden for society, I don't see how 37.4% of those potentially or already working in the public sector may actually be satisfied in their job. So we call it professional pride or public service motivation. This is probably difficult to achieve if the public image is so extremely bad. And to top it, I just wanted to, once again referring to the study of Mr. Sobiek, refer to the general view of the media and of the politicians, saying that, I have to turn around here, that the image of government administration conveyed in the media is rather bad. Yeah. So under these circumstances, we the trade unions believe one of the issues is also, which is extremely important, is communication. And in this context I want to refer, which is something for me which is very exemplary in terms of social dialogue, in terms of information consultation, is an agreement which was signed among the social partners at European level for quality service in central administration. Because the employers, both the employers and the trade unions had the feeling, I mean, this bad image has to change, and we can actually only change it A, through social dialogue, at least through consultation, and B, by the employers and the employees. Once again, I come back to the beginning of my presentation saying there's no need of a top-down, unilateral top-down approach. Consultation is needed with those implementing actually the policies. So this agreement has been signed in December 2012 and is being currently implemented. Now we can have a long discussion about the legal meaning of such an agreement. You may know that this so-called article, the article, I think it was 155 in the TFEU, stating that the social partners, the European social partners, can conclude agreements, and under certain circumstances these agreements become law. Now I don't see this agreement yet becoming law, but I think it's a very important, I would say, political and societal sign or declaration. And that is why the social partners are currently working on the implementation, and it is a document where the public administration values are laid down, among them equity, integrity, better communication, efficiency, and quality life at work. And if you can have a look at this, there are basically 6 basic principles: proper welcome, the principle of equity, the principle of integrity, principle of efficiency, quality of life at work, and communication. The reason why I stepped into this agreement was communication, if you remember, saying that if we don't communicate better what the public service is doing, if we don't improve the image of the public sector, both in terms of employer or service provider, we will not get very far. And all this in conjunction with reducing staff and reducing the quality of working conditions, we believe that we will not get very far with the quality of service delivery. However, you can see when you look at this framework agreement that you may have the feeling that these are mainly obligations for the staff, for the workers in public sector. And you're totally right. These are obligations. These appeal to a certain pride of the workers. I work in the public sector. I treat the people equally, impartially. I'm not corrupt. I'm an integral person. I'm working efficiently. And I have to communicate why I'm doing this or that. So here we lay down principles for the workers to say this is what you have to do when you work in the public sector. Yeah. But in turn, of course, we the trade unions say, whoa, we cannot only demand from the workers or from the public sector in general, we can certainly also have demands ourselves as trade unions, right? And these demands, you will find them in the text. I have one here. We have been distributing it so zealously that we just have one left. These are, first of all, which is very important for us, that there's a sufficient resource. There's sufficient resources of stuff, right? And that those working for the public sector can enjoy a certain quality of life at work. And here we speak of competence development, we speak of good working conditions, we speak of combating precarious work, very, very important to my mind. After the slide I have shown to you, the trade union freedom, of course, and the social dialogue. And this is what we, the trade unions, I would say, claim in return for contributing to a more effective public sector in the common interest. So this, I'm saying it again, this framework agreement can be seen, to my mind, as exemplary in combining reforms on the one hand, the need of reforms, and on the other hand, social dialogue and workers' protection. And of course it underlines the importance of the functioning social dialogue in general. Once again, I refer to a study of the European Commission, Industrial Relation in Europe 2012. So all those who are looking for arguments why social dialogue can actually be useful should have a look at this publication. Those who are not really in favor of social dialogue should not buy this publication, as it gives a lot of insight and a lot of good reasons why social dialogue can actually be useful. I would just summarize it very briefly. Social dialogue creates trust and partnership at the workplace. Social dialogue leads to a better adaptability and employability, reducing of the staff. Social dialogue reduces clearly conflicts, and social dialogue needs to be reinforced also as a fundamental right and embraced as an effective tool for change. So this is something which is for us, of course, for trade unions, of tremendous importance to follow that line of argumentation, to see if, I'm coming back to the beginning of my presentation, if you envisage reforms, even if these are cuts, and this is also very well said in this publication. I think in the end, if you involve trade unions representatives and you involve workers in the decision making, once first the decisions will be more sustainable, and second, I think management will benefit from much more trust. And finally, we should not, it's like a little bit the same argumentation with, you know, referendum, for instance. Now, are the citizens capable of taking difficult decisions? I think the same applies a little bit to workers in certain organizations. Even if decisions which are a little bit difficult to take have to be taken, I think the moment trade unions or staff is being consulted, I could imagine that some of these reforms will be also supported by the actors if they are socially justifiable. So I also refer to the Commission fitness check on EU law in the area of information and consultation of workers. So these are 3 directives basically which do not apply to the central public administration, which, for instance, social partners at the moment are thinking. So these are 3 directives, EU directives, whether the scope of application should be enlarged. I don't know if politically this will be feasible, but of course, for the trade unions, for the social dialogue and central government administration, that would be a very, very, how could I say, could be very far-reaching instrument, right? Because all of a sudden, these 3 directives on information and consultation would be applicable for the public sector. Now, this is of course also a question whether the employers, meaning the member states in that case, would be willing to negotiate on such an issue. But first of all, what I said already, information and consultation is a fundamental social right. So regardless of the cost and benefit analysis, we should actually not forget that. EU Charter, I think it's article, I don't know, I forgot. Anyway, in the social chapter, and we have it certainly in the European Convention of Human Rights and in the European Social Charter. So information consultation is a fundamental social right. But we know we're living in times, as mentioned earlier, where maybe fundamental rights may not have that importance as to other issues, especially to cost-benefit analysis, and that's why I'm adding the next point. Once again, also in the fitness check, the Commission comes a little bit to the same conclusions as in the industrial relations of 2012, that social dialogue, information and consultation solves problems in the workplace, encourages communication and knowledge of processes within the workplace, leads to knowledge sharing and communication among employees. Their involvement is seen as a high performance work practice. Of course, information and communication technologies play an important role in successfully introducing innovative changes. So this just once again to highlight the benefits from these two publications, also where it is clearly stated. I'm not going into the whole chapter of information new communication information technologies, because this is an issue where, of course, we trade unions and social dialogue plays a tremendous role in introducing these technologies, and especially in finding or encouraging the workers to adapt themselves and to learn. But I think this is being very extensively dealt with in other subjects, as understood during the conference also. So I just want to highlight that of course, when it comes to the introduction of new information communication technologies, we will have, for instance, from CESI a seminar next year in Tallinn with the Estonian government on the issue of what the impacts are actually of on the workers. Is everybody, are all the workers on board? Are the workers ready to perform certain tasks or to learn every time more? And I think this is an issue where social dialogue, to come back to it, is of extreme value. Once again, social dialogue as a tool to make public administration, the public service, more efficient. So in consulting and informing workers, the benefits will always outweigh the costs. And what society needs, as a closing remark, I think we need a new rhetoric. The public sector is mentioned. An investment, a factor for growth and well-being, a cornerstone in the European social model. We need a new image of the public sector. We need to sell it better. We need to, of course, reform it where we can, and reforming once again with the help of the social dialogue and of the trade unions. Maybe trade unions are not needed. Maybe the workers themselves can do the job, which I doubt sometimes. But I think informing and consulting the workers is of essential value. And finally, we need an attractive, functioning public sector. And with this, I know that you've had lots of speeches today. And as I mentioned earlier, this is rather a political speech, so less a technical speech. I would just thank you for attention and finish with a final slogan. We need to support workers to support the public sector. In this sense, thank you very much.